Hi again, Alan Hotaling, founder and director of Evolve Tutoring and College Admissions Coaching. So why are you taking time out of your day to watch this video? The chances are you either have a son or a daughter who is embarking on this process, a son or daughter who's already in the process, or you're someone who just feels that you need more information about what all of this looks like. I think that in the last 20 or 30 years, maybe since some of us have gone through this, some things have stayed the same, right? But there's plenty of things that have changed. Another thing that has changed drastically over the last 20 years or so is just the cost of college. It's gone up over 1,000%. Think about that for a second. This puts an immense amount of pressure on not just the family who may be footing the whole bill or part of it, but the student as well who's aware of that. Private universities are $50,000 a year or more. Some are approaching $70,000 a year at this point. Public colleges are in the $30,000 a year range. This is an enormous investment, not just of time and energy, but of resources and money. The bottom line is we want our son or daughter to succeed. We want our son or daughter to do well because we love them. We want to see them grow. We want to see them flourish. We want to see them do that in a place that they will be happy, a place they'll be able to make friends that they'll have for the rest of their lives. And yes, study and get a degree, but also have a lot of fun and feel good about themselves. So how do we go about making that happen? Supporting students in getting there, and supporting them in an ethical way, supporting them in a way that empowers them in the process, supporting them in a way that when they get into a college that they wanted to go to, that they feel good about themselves. So they can go there and they can succeed and they can move toward becoming who they are. What's the first step in that process? For us, the first step in that process, after we get to know a student and get to know a family, is starting to form a college list. It's a very foundational piece because it's what establishes the work that has to be done. Without a college list, we can't figure out a timeline, we can't figure out whether we need to do the common application or individual applications. We can't start coming up with the writing that needs to be accomplished or the amount of recommendations we need to be securing. So a college list becomes sort of our touchstone, if you will, for the entire process. But how do you begin forming it? How many schools go on the list? One of the things we do in our holistic approach is as we get to know students and we get to know families, we can start to sort of take things out, if you will. The process of elimination is really important. A student may know that they want to go to school in a warm climate. Well, there you go. There's huge parts of the country that are just off the map. A student might know what size school they want to go to, whether they want a Greek life component, whether a lot of school spirit is important to them, whether they might want to be in a smaller, more intimate campus, an urban setting or rural setting. And at that point, we haven't even gotten into what they want to study. So we have questionnaires that we use with students and also just organic conversations. And from there, we start to move from 3,000 schools down to 100 schools and maybe come up with an initial list that can be as many as 20 or 25 schools sometimes. Something else that's pretty important and needs to be taken into account, of course, are the students' grades and test scores. What is their GPA? How do they do on the SAT or the ACT? What is their curriculum in school right now? And when I talk to students about this, I'm really clear with them that I don't care what you got for grades. I don't care if you're a C student or a B student or an A student. And I don't say that in a callous way. I just say that it's just information for us. Your grades are not the measure of who you are as a human being unless you allow them to be. But it is valuable information because with that information, we want to make sure that the list that we're starting to form is in line and is reasonable. So then the question becomes what's reasonable and what's not. What we do, and a lot of people in this business do the same thing, is we sort of have three categories of schools. The reach schools, which are fairly easy to define, right? For instance, Harvard, MIT, all the Ivies, they're reach schools for everyone. If you have a perfect GPA, perfect test scores, have done 4 service trips to third world countries, and are an incredible human being by all accounts, those schools are still a reach. They're a reach for everyone. It's also fairly easy to define the safer schools. And we don't like to use the word safety because that implies that, oh, you'll just get in there automatically, and that is not always the case. This process is an art, it's not a science. But safer schools tend to be a little easier to define as well. And then there's those middle ground schools, which are the schools that we feel are a really good fit for you academically, that you fit the profile for. And that's where our expertise comes in. We know schools all over the country, we sort of know what admissions criteria are, and we can help to sort of fine tune that list. That being said, I think it's very, very important that even the safer schools on your list, the student should want to go to that school. I always say to students, think about it, if that school were the only school you were to get in, would you be okay going there? The answer should be yes, or it should not be on your list. I do think that whenever possible, it's good to visit college campuses. I know this can be really challenging, especially if your son or daughter wants to go to a school on the other side of the country. I think that even if there's a school that's within driving distance that they're remotely interested in, I think it's a really good idea to try to take a drive there. And even to just walk around the campus, you don't always have to do a formal tour. Ideally, it's best to do it when school is in session, not during summers or spring break. And that's hard too, because that's usually when you can do it. If you're in New England, you're within 30 minutes or an hour probably of some campuses. So you can drive around. If you're in other areas of the country, obviously that gets a little more challenging. But I think it's important to try to get them to see campuses, and even to do it pretty early in the process. If you have a son or daughter who's a sophomore, take a weekend, visit a couple of campuses, just walk around. It starts to make the process more real for them, and it, again, empowers them in their own journey. When we start to talk about timelines, usually that means that I've received a question from a student or a mom or a dad that says, are we already behind? One of the things I always say to people, not to be all zen, but you can only be where you are. So we've worked with students who haven't called us until literally senior year has started. Now, is the process rushed if you do it that way? Absolutely. Does it put more stress on the student and the family? Absolutely. Have we got it done? Yes. Are those students in college as we speak? Yes, which is always good. Now, all that being said, ideally speaking, I think getting started during junior year is the way to go. And we have some students who we get started with earlier than that. We get some students that come on board sophomore year. There's not as much to do that early. It's more looking at curriculum, making sure that they feel comfortable about the classes they're taking, looking at extracurriculars and things like that. But in all honesty, we don't do a lot of that work. Most of our families come on during junior year. Once senior year kicks in, we're basically looking at a few different things. Colleges have a regular decision deadline, obviously. Those vary, but they're all after the first of the year, generally speaking. Some colleges have early action, and some colleges also have early decision. The decision between early action and early decision is pretty simple. It's that early decision is binding. We only encourage students to apply early decision if they have their heart set on that school, because if they are accepted at that school, they are required to go. Can it be gotten out of? Yes, but it's not easy, and it's not a path you want to go. A lot of students decide to apply early action to many schools just to get the process over. There's sort of debate within this community whether applying early action helps you or not. I think sometimes it can help you. I think it won't hurt you. And I think it's good when possible to get the process over with so your son or daughter can actually get back to enjoying their senior year of high school. Another question we get asked quite often is how many schools should be on the list? How many schools should we apply to? There's no tried and true answer for that. When we do initial lists with students, it's certainly not unusual for there to be 25 schools on the list. Do we ultimately apply to all 25 of those schools? Usually not. I think a good number to have in your head is a dozen. That's just always what I say, because if you come in 2 or 3 under that, that's fine if you feel good about it. If you come in at 15, it might be a little high, but that's okay too. There's no one answer. And I would encourage you as you go through this process, if anyone says to you with any of your questions, no, this is the way to do it, be a little suspect of that. Trust your own gut. There's a lot of information you can get out there. You don't have to just listen to me or anyone else. Yes, I know a little bit more about this probably than you do watching this video. It doesn't mean I know everything. It doesn't mean I have the market cornered. It doesn't mean that all of my answers are right 100% of the time. I mean, they're right a lot of the time based on my experience, but there is no one answer to these questions. So I would say, generally speaking, in that range of 8 to 12 or 13 schools is a good number to sort of settle on for your list. Something else that doesn't get given enough thought, in my opinion, is how best does your daughter or your son learn? It's really great if they want to go to a large university, but are they prepared to be in a lecture hall with 200 other students with absolutely no direct contact with a professor? For some students, that's completely fine. They're fine waiting until their junior and senior years to be in more intimate classroom settings. For some students, that just won't work. So another thing I think you have to look at when you're looking at your list and schools that might go on that list is average class size. Also, what resources are available at that college? Are there learning centers and writing centers and tutoring centers in place? Does your son or daughter struggle with a learning challenge? Does that college that they want to attend support that learning challenge? These are all things to strongly consider, because you want to make sure that you're setting them up for success. And it's not just the pie in the sky, I want to go to this large university. Well, that's great, but if it doesn't fit your learning style, then sometimes alternatives need to be looked at. So we've covered a bit of ground here today, and I really appreciate you taking 5 or 10 minutes to listen to this. Hopefully you found it helpful. I think it's really important, again, to realize what the overall goal is. The overall goal is that your daughter or your son is in a college that's a good fit for them, that they feel proud about, that they feel invested in. So they're empowered in their own life and empowered in their own journey. So hopefully some of this information will help you. There'll be a few other videos, as you know, that will be following this that will discuss other aspects of the process. If you already know that you might need support, you can always, go to our website and schedule a free 20-minute strategy session. And that's where, we can get a little better sense of where you're at, and we can see if it may be a good fit for me to work with your son or daughter, or one of our team members. I have a certain amount of slots each year that I devote to this. I'm pretty careful with how many people I bring on board, because it's an intimate process. It's a long-term process, and I want to make sure that I can really bring myself to each student that I work with. So if you have any questions too, feel free to reach out. The way in which I try to run my tutoring business and in my coaching business and with the incredible team I have on board is that we try to just be of service. It's not just if you're willing to pay us some money, we have information for you. I just believe in sharing the information that you have and trying to help people. And if, as a result of that, you come on board and actually work with us, great. And if you don't, I hope that this was helpful. So look out for the next video in the next 2 or 3 days in your box, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.